All these rejections from the middle Bollinger Band.
Resistance we're going to need.
If you actually see here, we get a
And we'll look for a healthy higher
I
low.
would not
don't have
be
the
convinced
pullback
to
to
enter a long trade.
Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. We're looking at Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, EOS, BNB, and then we'll go off into story time. Today's been a slow day, and we're having that same slow fade that we were looking for the bulls. We're looking for the time that the bulls are going to prove to us we're not just going to slow fade, and we don't have that yet. So I'll show you what I mean by that on the shorter term time frames. But the daily chart is giving us a bear flag setup with a daily inside bar to be watching. We absolutely can head down to our recent lows, and we're watching that downtrend resistance line I had in the video yesterday on the hourly. We've got our uptrend support line on the hour or on the RSI here, and this is the daily. So key trend lines on the RSI, which are not normally what I'm keeping an eye on, but in this scenario they certainly are. And again, we just look at the 4-hour time frame. It's just slow and steady. There's upper wicks, there's lower wicks, and just a clear bear move. We are still holding the low of the previous pullback before that tether news came out. That's down at 60.70. And again, just daily inside bar, very tight. This is the fade that I'm talking about. So we have a news reaction, and then we just fade for a dozen hours, and then another news reaction saved things, and then we just fade for a dozen hours. So more than a dozen hours. So bulls aren't proving it. They are not proving it to me. We're in a downtrend. We have to be very skeptical of the bulls. We cannot give them any grain or not any benefit of the doubt is what I'm trying to say. And that's the scenario that we have to remain, and bears are comfortable. That's essentially what it boils down to. If I'm in a short position right now, I have absolutely nothing to worry about. And it's the kind of scenario now where this has played out so many times that even if I'm a short and I get stuck in a news position and, you know, it runs a bit on me, as long as I don't get liquidated, I know, well, if I just hold on and not cover my short, I can, you know, watch it fade for another dozen hours and then cover after that. So until these bears get punched in the mouth, not happening. Ethereum on the daily chart, and Ethereum and Litecoin have pulled back a little bit more significantly compared to what Bitcoin has done. Look at this daily chart. No follow through. We have not seen 2 green days in a row in the last week. Inside bar bear break on the daily time frame. 4-hour chart for Ethereum lost the higher low pattern, and we are looking at no support until down at the low 421.10, aside from what we just hit 436.27. So the hourly time frame is a very clear lower high, lower low pattern. And again, just comparing the 4-hour charts, much more significant pullback than what Bitcoin has done on its 4-hour chart, much more contained on Bitcoin. So that's where we stand on Ethereum. Resistance, you can pick out a half dozen on all these lower highs: 449, 452.62, 460.72. And of course, exponential resistances now we have to keep an eye on. So I would love to say that the bulls are looking good and this is the bottom, but it's just not. And you have to remain unbiased in viewpoints of your charts, because if you have any emotional attachment, I'll start, you know, because I'm trading bullish and otherwise I'm trading Canadian MJ these days, I would be sitting here saying, you know, like, how can I make this a bullish scenario in my mind? You know, what clues can I look for? Well, where's the divergence and what's the hidden clues? And it's just not here. So Ethereum is weak. We'll see if we just set another lower high on the hourly time frame. Litecoin, same thing. We pulled back, no follow through on the bounce. Our RSI on the daily time frame is still down at 25 here, so we're still extremely oversold. 4-hour chart lost the higher low pattern. I exited the vast majority of my positions on these losses of higher lows, and I believe I used the hourly chart for my first one last night, and it was actually used this level 81.40. So I initially got stopped out here and then exited a bit more when that level broke 80.84, and now I have a very, very small position, which is hardly even worth me paying attention to, but I'll probably exit that. I'm holding on to that just to see if we do form a tightening daily pattern, because what I'm looking at for the potential of Bitcoin on this daily chart would be that if we did pull back, the bulls would initially be able to hold that low of 5,777, unless we saw, you know, a 7% dump all at once. I'm looking for the potential of a tightening daily pattern to be keeping an eye on. So Litecoin, clear hourly lower highs, just like Ethereum, 79.30, another one at 80.50. And just bears in control of this short-term momentum. EOS, daily time frame, no follow-through on the bounce, pulling back. Only support is 689. Only hope for the bulls is a higher low and then continuation of the bounce. There's no sign of that at this point. That's their only hope. We did break support of this 4-hour higher low of 770, just like everybody else. and new support is 753, and then we're looking down at the recent low of 689. Hourly time frame, last resistance 792, another one here at 818, and tightening range, low volume, not a whole lot going on, but we know the bears are certainly in favor at this point here as well. So these videos, I mean, the reason that they're nice and concise and quick and easy is because not much is changing in this space over the last week of trading. And we're seeing little signs, you know, bulls have a chance to shift momentum and they just aren't doing it. So we're not seeing a whole lot of change. And I just said in the chat room today where the pendulum and the universe is this balanced organism, whatever you want to call it. And I compared it to a pendulum, just back and forth. So 2017 was the easiest trading environment that I have ever experienced in 7 years of trading. It was the most pure technical analysis I've ever seen, and I believe that's because there was so much emotion involved and a lot of people that didn't know what they were doing. And this is completely different. It is a much more difficult trading environment. 2017 compared to stocks, I didn't trade stocks from May until October or something. 4 or 5 months, only crypto. It was so easy. And then I moved to stocks, and now crypto is harder than stocks. There's these fake outs, there's a lack of volume. So this trading environment that we are currently in to be learning in is not ideal. So keep that in mind. And that's why I keep, ushering people around. Check out Canadian MJ, check out these miners, because there are different environments that you can be learning in, and this is the most difficult one. So if I were just getting into technical analysis, where, I walked into a bull market when I first started trading, and it was penny stocks, MJ penny stocks, and this was in 2010. And I lucked out. If I walked into any other regular penny stock market in the summer or any other time, I would have gotten crushed. I would have lost my money, and I probably wouldn't have traded again for a long time. And I would have taken the conservative route and the standard route of long-term mutual funds or whatever. So if you're learning in this environment and you lose, that could potentially, have a very negative impact on the potential if you were in a different kind of environment. So I just want to point that out, where don't beat yourself up. Again, this is a paper trading environment, and one to be using very small capital and one to be very patient in. So EOS just did it. BNB, daily inside bar is tightening up. So we're about to form another inside bar. The volume is significantly dropping off. You can see, let's see if the hourly chart's got it better. So a bit of an equilibrium just with our low, high, higher, low. I like it better on the daily time frame, but we have some clear supports of $14 and $13.76, and our major resistance is the top of the bounce at $15.15. So we'll see how we break these daily inside bars at this point. If we do get a bear break, it's all about this low down here, the low of this channel, and that's down at $13.40 and $13.34. So if we get a bear break on the daily, these are the key levels that we're going to be testing very shortly after that happens. And if the bulls get a break, we'll be looking to head back into this tightening pattern, back up in the upper $15 range. So I'm still keeping an eye on GBTC. This is what you trade in the stock market if you want exposure to Bitcoin. It does have a premium, so it means you're paying more essentially than what Bitcoin is worth. But we're making a clear bear break here. And I want to point out the RSI, although settings changed so it's not visible. GBTC. So here's the RSI on the daily, and I pointed this out in a recent video, but we're entering a level of more extreme oversold conditions. So that tells us the emotional spectrum is getting more pushed to the downside than it has in quite some time, specifically in GBTC, but obviously that reflects on the Bitcoin market to a certain degree. So scrolling back, the last time that the RSI was this low was when we had a little flash dump down to 25 cents. And here we are trading up over $9. So this is back in, August of 2015. So obviously Bitcoin's price was significantly different. But the bottom line is that's the most oversold that GBTC has ever been. This is the second most oversold that it's ever been on the daily time frame. So again, that's worth noting. And that tells me that the psychology of this current market environment is reaching an extreme. And as I talked about with the pendulum and the universe, constant balance, we swing from one side to the other. Obviously, it'll just be an oversold bounce at this point, but it's the more we get extreme to one side, the more we start looking for that bounce to cool off the RSI levels. So I am going to continue to monitor GBTC for that oversold bounce opportunity. And again, I would only day trade GBTC, which I will do once the daily trend does change in crypto. I will have more exposure to capital by using both my stock account and my crypto account. But I'm only going to day trade it because I would never hold something overnight where Bitcoin's going to be trading for 16 hours. The market's going to be closed and my hands are tied and my stop losses could get skipped. So this is only a day trader in my opinion. Otherwise, there's tons of risk that is just not necessarily necessary. We need to stay in control of our positions and of our capital. The more, the better at all times for me. So that's where we stand heading into tomorrow. Tight ranges, some daily inside bars. Bulls still not really doing anything. And looks like we need news in order for any kind of follow through on any kind of moves. And that's not a good situation to be in where you just need constant press releases. So on to story time. Was just entering Colorado, Rocky Mountain National Park. Colorado was definitely the best state that I visited on this current road trip. Or some people think I'm on this road trip right now. This was 5 years ago. So on this past road trip. And I traveled around for, I think, 6 weeks, just going all over and spending, a solid week in every place, a week in the Rocky Mountains and a week and I had an open schedule to the degree that people were telling me places and I was like, all right, I'll go there next, and nearby areas. And those were the best places. I didn't find them on the internet. It was places that people told me about. And one of them was Conundrum Hot Springs in Colorado, which is just this mind-blowing place. Here's the path to hike up. It's a high elevation hike. You go from about 8,000 to 11,000, a couple hundred feet, and it takes 8 hours and pretty much all day. And when you get up there, so there's some big mountains, nice views, and when you get up there, it is just, that's the wrong picture. It's just this hot spring that is on top of the world. So here's people sitting in the big major pool. You could probably fit about 20 people in there, and then there were a couple little pools further down that were more private. And it was just this view into this valley where you could see so far. And you would hike. There's a path. I'm on a hill right now, and the tents are behind you. So about 50 feet, 100 feet away, you put your tent up, and then just wake up before the sunrise and go down in there and watch the sunrise from these hot springs. And it was a perfect temperature, and you can maneuver the temperature by where you're sitting. And it was just awesome. And met a guy who literally he was the true definition of a drifter, where he would camp out in national parks, but you're only allowed to stay, I think, 6 months in a rolling period. So he had 2 spots that were his more permanent camps, and one of them was up here. So every summer he would hike up multiple trips. This guy, he was 60 something, and he was just insane that he would take all this weight and this gear up, but he would just live up there, and he was living the life and eating some wild foods and things like that. And he just knew everything about this place. He's been doing it for a decade. So it was really cool to talk to him. He said at one point they had a big squash, and they had a bunch of people, and they buried it at the bottom of the hot spring and put rocks on it. And 2 days later it was fully cooked, and they ate the squash from the heat of the geothermal activity underneath. But there was a scenario where I went up there during the weeknights, and there was only a few people there, and it was people who were there for, nature and to get away from everything. And we had some great conversations under the stars in this hot spring. And I actually was talking about lucid dreaming to someone in the hot spring that night, and they came back the next morning and said they had their first lucid dream after that. So that's certainly the right environment for that. But it was nice because it was low key, but then the weekend came, and I originally intended on only staying for 2 nights. And there's the more private pools early in the morning. And I only brought food for 2 nights, but I got up there and was like, man, it took me forever to get up here. I'm staying, and I'm staying as long as I can. So I stretched my food out. I started rationing my food, and I ended up eating, these are glacier lilies that are edible. So I was eating a ton of these, and learned that from the guy who was living up here as well. So, and then I would trade things with other hikers, any extra food that you had. Some guy gave me some soy sauce so my brown rice wouldn't be as terrible by itself, but ended up staying for 4 or 5 nights up there. And on Friday and Saturday night is when a bunch of people came up. At one point, as you know, at this point, I like getting naked. So I was naked by myself in this hot spring, at about 4 o'clock or whatever, Friday afternoon. And then all of a sudden, 20 people start showing up. And it's people my age, which I welcome. I normally like solitude in nature, but at this point on the road trip, I had been very devoid of any human interaction. So I welcomed it, and a ton of people showed up. They had, beach balls and boom boxes, and it was just a party. People were passing around rum in the hot spring. And so I'm in there naked, and group by group keeps coming up, 5 people, 6 people. Next thing you know, this entire tub is filled, this pool, with 20 people, and I'm the only naked guy, and nobody knows it because I haven't left the water yet. So when I finally had to get out, I'm just this weird naked dude when everybody else has their clothes on. And normally it's fine to get naked in hot springs, but not when you're the only one. And it was very interesting to get out of that scenario. But Fortunately, people didn't really care very much, but was able to trade with those people. I had some North Carolina moonshine. My buddy was a slanger of moonshine. Shout out to Squatch if he's watching. But I had some moonshine, and I was trading people my moonshine for food so I could stay up there longer. And it was just an incredible spot. Next spot, I took a picture of this camping spot, more inward towards the state, more westward. And forget exactly where, just national forest, just the kind of area where you can just pull off the road right here and camp. And it was, set back in the woods, and there's a creek right next to it. And it's just such freedom on national forest and BLM land. And this spot resonated with me because the moose is definitely my animal, and it has been for a very long time. And this night I was mid practicing lucid dreaming on this entire road trip. That was like a goal of mine. And I had my dream journal, and I was reading lucid dreaming books, and I was practicing, during my waking state every day and going to sleep every night. So I was having these incredibly vivid dreams, and I was exploring the dream space not every night, but every few nights. And this one night I was staying at this place, and I woke up in the middle of the night because something was rustling behind me, and something big starts sniffing the tent. And I'm like, oh, damn, we're about to have a bear experience. So I don't move. I just keep listening, and it walks around the side of the tent. And at this point, there's just a big bright moon and moonlight. And I have my mesh, so I can see my mesh, but I'm not going to move and turn around and look at it. So I just wait for it to come into my field of vision. And it was a giant moose. And then eventually another one came from the left side, and then there was a baby one as well, a little small one. And I'm just seeing their outlines and their moonlit bodies, and they walk over and smell my fire, and just hung out for a while. And the entire time it felt very, very surreal, and I kept doing these reality checks, like, is this a lucid dream? Is this really happening right now? And I kept making myself feel things and pinching myself and doing my memory exercises. And it was this very surreal moment of being unable for literally about 5-10 minutes to determine whether it was a dream or not. And eventually I did come to the conclusion that this is definitely real. And once they moved along, there were then other animals' eyes in the woods. I believe there were deer that were following along. But I woke up the next morning and did my best to find tracks for anything, and I just couldn't find many tracks around the fireplace. And it was just definitely this moment that stood out for its awesomeness. So that's all I got for now. We're going to keep going in Colorado. Plenty of other spots to check out, and then we'll move on to Utah. Utah's got a ton of spots. So I love doing this. I love you guys for appreciating these stories, but it's nice to relive them. I haven't told anybody half of these stories, and 5 years later, it's cool to go back. So thanks again. We'll see you tomorrow, and let's see if Bitcoin can do anything for these bulls. Bulls have to prove it, and to prove it, we need our prove it indicator, which is volume. Bulls need to show up, they need to have volume, and they need to have continuation. We've yet to see those three things happen.